Is it correct to say that prioritization, priority setting, is against the realization of the right to health?
I would say on the contrary. Prioritization, if done well and in a legitimate way, is a fundamental prerequisite for realization of the right to health. And I want to explain that a little bit more. I think that you can think about the right to health as a right to everything that can make you healthy. Physically, psychologically, mentally. But in a world where there is more and more health technologies, more and more things that can be done for more and more people, the resources available are just not enough to provide everybody in society with everything that they could possibly benefit from health-wise. And if we do not think very hard about how do we use the resources that we have in a way that makes them stretch to provide as much as possible for as many as possible, we cannot realize the right to health in the best possible way in society. And that is what prioritization is about. It's about figuring out, sitting together, the best minds, using the best evidence to make health care and other services that enables the health of the population stretch as far as possible.
You said prioritization, if done well, can or is a prerequisite to the realization of the right to health. So what does done well mean in this context?
When I say done well, I mean, you can prioritize in different ways. I mean, you can prioritize the ones with more power. And that's what usually happens. You can prioritize the one who push hardest, has more political power, the profit of the pharmaceutical companies. You can prioritize the towns. So priority setting can be done in a way that is skewed or a way that enables, that actually takes that gives equal concern to all parts of the population and that looks at who are more vulnerable, where is the need the largest, why is the need largest in certain areas, why do some people have less good healthcare but also less healthy lives, and then use the evidence, use people from different professions, from different patient groups, different walks of life, sit together and talk about what the best possible way to stretch is. So, first of all, it's not only a technical task. Because, of course, we need to do assessments to know how good is this medicine. Is there something else that can provide more health for the same amount of resources for the same people? But it's also about thinking about other types of illnesses, that people that cannot be cured, people who are disabled, people with chronic diseases. They also need to be prioritized, and it's not necessarily in the same matrix. We need to think about public health measures, clean water, sanitation, public health campaigns against sexual violence, for instance. All of this are affecting the lives of people, and we also need to think about that when we prioritize the resources in society. So that's why I'm saying that it has to be a process that takes into account that health is also about values. It's about what we think is important to provide for people, what makes people's lives healthy, and it's about taking different considerations into account. So it's a political process. We have to be aware of the powers that influence this process. It's also a technical process, so we have to take care of the evidence. And then, and it's not enough that the outcome is sound, but people must also have faith in the process itself, so that they can see the outcome as fair and legitimate.
Very powerful what you just say, that it's not only about evidence and technical criteria, but it is also a political process. But so let me ask you one follow-up question to that. You've had plenty of experience, research experience, looking at prioritizing processes in different contexts in the world, what are the most common pitfalls or failures of these prioritizing processes?
I think in practice,
In practice.
the most, one very serious pitfall is that certain groups have too much influence. I think that there are often conflict of interest of people involved. Pharmaceutical companies have a lot of influence. Some patients groups have a lot of influence. So I think that is a pitfall. But I also think another pitfall is that sometimes we think about it too much as a technical issue. And I think sometimes it makes us think about health as only medicines and health services in a narrow sense. So I think sometimes it makes us not look at the other issues, like basic water and sanitation, other issues that also are not part of health departments, but that also needs to be taken into account when we look at how to provide health for societies.
Yeah, in one of your recent books, Litigating Health Rights, you co-author a chapter about prioritization and how the medicines that have been litigated against court or with courts have been provided to citizens. And you seem to make some conclusions about the affordability for Latin American societies of these medicines. Could you expand a little bit of that, on the conclusions of that chapter?
Yes, I think what we found doing the research is that courts do a lot of different things. So when it comes to health, they have very useful roles in terms of increasing compliance in their health systems. They also can alert the systems to things that should be provided by the systems but are not really, or not provided to all. But what we also find is that in some cases where some of the medicines that are being litigated are either medicines that are not, and that people get through litigation, are sometimes medicines that do not have proven effect, or that are very, very expensive, and often for very serious diseases, but have very little effect. So it's marginal effect and very expensive. So what we find is that some types of litigation and some types of decisions by courts are problematic if you look at it in terms of the health, the general right to health in society. If you want to sort of make the basket that you have stretch to cover on an equal basis more in society. But I think that if you want to avoid, if you want to sort of create a situation where courts don't provide that to the extent that we've seen in some countries, I think you need to have you have to actually have a credible process. I don't think you can start. It's not easy to start with the courts because the courts also have to believe in the priority setting process that you have in society. So it's complicated because I think if I'm very ill and I have a treatment that has been proven effective and I go to court and they say, I'm sorry, you cannot get it, it's too expensive, then you have to believe that there is a credible system, that the money actually will be spent for something else that is better. And I think, so it's also a process of creating trust. And it's also, so that is not only about creating the system for prioritization, it's also about actually believing that it's being followed up in practice.
I've read in your literature the compliance argument, and it seems
Yes.
to me that it's much related to the trust that you just
Yes.
mentioned, legitimacy. Would you want to expand on the compliance argument?
If you want to understand it, you could just say that there has been made a promise. For instance, in many countries there are health packages that people are entitled to. And sometimes people don't get what they're entitled to according to the health package. And then there's a lack of compliance. And then courts or other bodies can play a role in showing the lack of compliance, making statistics, but some can do that, but also pointing to it and say, you need to do this, you promised it. And the same is, so there are all kinds of monitoring that can do that, not only courts. But that's the kind of compliance that is really, really That's really important. But then, of course, there is the other issue of compliance that regards the human rights obligations that a country has from the Constitution or from international law, where people going to court would say, you're not providing these services to this group of patients or to this patient, and that is you should have provided it.
Even
it
if
should
it's
have
not
been
prioritized,
yes,
to be honest.
it should have been in the priority package.
Exactly.
And that is also something to take seriously, because that could be part of a discussion. Because once it's not prioritization, even if it's well done, it's not done once and for all. There could be other perspectives that needed to be taken into account. Maybe you're not fulfilling your obligations. I'm not saying that you should provide everything to everybody, but maybe some people should have a higher priority than they have.
Absolutely.
Because maybe they have not been fairly treated, or maybe something happened with the cost of the medication for this group that means that now it's cheaper and should be provided. So it's an ongoing process. So it's compliance both with what has been promised in the health package, but also with the overall principles, if you want, of what the obligation should be.
The two dimensions of compliance. Let me ask you just one final question. We've been working more or less together in two events. You've seen the multi-stakeholder work on operationalizing the right to health. Would you want to make any further remarks that you think are important for practitioners all over the world?
Maybe two things. I think we have a big challenge of communicating where we started out. I think we have a strong, sort of a big challenge communicating that prioritization, sort of to prioritize resources in a good way, to make them sort of do as much as possible, is essential to realizing the right to health. That the right to health is about building systems that give as much health as possible to the whole population in an equitable way. And I think to build understanding for the fact that that is not contrary to the right to health, but that is fundamental to the right to health. That we need to see the right to health as the right to a fair health system and a right of everybody to a fair share within that system on an equitable basis. So I think maybe that is my main point.
Thank you so much, Siri.